Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with INTERPHEX 2016, presents INTERPHEX Live.
So we got Ben's, that's good.
Please go with Ben.
Okay. He's the serialization team leader at OPTEL Vision, and Frank Guthrie from Operations Apace Packaging. Did I get that right? Good. So I'm off to a flying start. Okay. I think one of the things we're going to do with, is let's just talk about number one. Can we touch on what counterfeiting is? I mean, would somebody want to just give us like a 5-minute update? So what is counterfeit drug? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Any drug that gets into the supply chain that really shouldn't be there, whether it's an out-of-date drug that got relabeled or somebody relabeling a product that's not even what it's supposed to be and selling it for good pharmaceuticals.
So diverted material too? I mean,
Yep.
That's it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just somebody making off with a skid load of somebody's drug substance and making a product. That's counterfeit as well, right?
Right.
As well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think, when you talk to, everybody has a different opinion. Having done some work at a hospital for many years, what I found was we would get the stuff back from the floors and invariably they'd make their way out to other people, which I always thought it was diversion, but that is considered counterfeit,
Yeah.
right?
So
Right.
it is, yeah.
Okay. So obviously one of the solutions that companies, because this is killing them, they wanted to make sure, and there's been a lot of regulations, so let's talk about it. So we're actually here to talk about serialization, which is an attempt to address counterfeiting, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, Ben, so why don't we start
Yes.
with you?
I see a lot of familiar faces here. I think people are now very familiar what serialization is these days. Serialization is putting a serialized number onto the item level. In the state, November 2017 is the deadline to put that number onto it for the item level as well as for the case. And indeed, there's going to be a next phase, which is the Children to Parent Association, which is going to be recorded or needed to be recorded by 2023. And I don't think it's a surprise to any of you to learn that in the US you have some specific legislation, but indeed there's the different legislation all over the world. There's a specific one started in Turkey a long time ago, and now South Korea, you have Brazil. So a lot of very interesting panel today that discuss that. So serialization, yes, is addressing a counterfeit product. The main intent is to save life here, indeed. And this is addressing it by serializing the package, making sure that the package is actually legit. And you're not injecting a drug, which could be water or any fake ones.
So Frank, is this something that the contractor worries about, or does the innovator worry about that? I mean,
Well, we as contract packagers worry about it because we have to try to be ready for what our customers need before they need it. And at Apace, we've successfully implemented serialization on our packaging lines to meet that requirement for our customers.
okay, so let's talk about it. So so we're talking track and trace, am I right? I mean, these things, you hear them all over the world.
Yeah, track and trace usually refer to aggregation. So you have the word serialization. People often use that one, but it's really at the packaging level where you want to put a unique number onto the item level. But when you're talking about the track and trace, you really want to record where this packaging is going, in which parent it is. So you want to have a full visibility of the whole supply chain, actually. So the matter of track and trace include aggregation when you're referring to that.
So what kind of granularity are we talking about on this, Frank? I mean, we're talking bottles, blisters, right down, or what?
Item level that you're selling, the sellable unit is where you have to have the serial numbers on by 2017. Also on the cases themselves, but you don't have to do the aggregation. So that is just, like he said, that's just serialization at that point. If you do the aggregation, so you know what bottle's in what bundle, what a case, and what pallet, then that's track and trace.
Okay, so for our topic today, maybe should we stick with track and trace and use that as the basis of what we discuss?
Definitely, yeah. So
Yeah,
serialization is definitely the big topic these days. That's my third event at INTERPHEX. I would say a lot of people were talking about the machines, how you implement that. From the topics I've seen earlier today in the panel, a lot of people are now talking about the IT around how we're going to be managing that data, but I feel that still there's quite a lot of challenges in implementing serialization into your lines. I think it's still a very interesting topic to look on the lesson learned, the main challenges that people are having by implementing it. And based on discussion we're having and seeing on the industry, there's a lack. People doesn't seem to be aware that there's a deadline coming and that you need to be ready for that. So it's quite challenging.
So deadline always tells me that regulatory types are involved. So what is the regulatory landscape? Why don't we start with that? I mean, Frank, so where are we at?
Well, the FDA requirement is
Right.
by November 23rd,
2017. Yeah.
2017, is you have to be doing item level and cases. The aggregation is a little further down the road, not necessarily in the regulations at this time, but it's probably going to be. And then some of the distributors and stuff are kind of pushing that because they really like having the aggregation for their receiving and for their inventory purposes.
And a good thing too, and this was addressed again this morning, but the law asks you to serialize the item and the case, but there's some distributor who's going to be distributing your items, the Mckesson, the Cardinal. There's actually 3 ABC. There's 3 main distributors in the industry, and these are actually pushing very hard in implementing aggregation. So the feedback I got from the panel this morning is that aggregation is fairly the way to go, although the FDA is not asking for it at the moment. So it's a decision that you need to take. Indeed, there's some investment involved in doing the all-in-one phase. So having to only putting a number onto an item, it's something to do, but it's not as complex as recording exactly what goes into each containers. So it seems like the big CMOs decided to go with an approach of going fully aggregated, meaning they are placing all of those machines to record the item levels, which one is going into which case is going into which pallet. So they decided to move a step forward in front of the law, not waiting for 2023, go right away and address those challenges.
So what happens when it gets to the distribution point? I mean, does that change over? I mean, let's just, Frank, so is that, say that case of stuff goes to a big, wholesale distributor. I mean, what's his obligation then?
Well, if you're just doing serialization, when you send the serialized information down, the distributor has no idea what bottle's in what case or anything else. So you're only doing item level serialization. But if you're doing the full aggregation with track and trace, you'll send it down and they can scan it and they'll know exactly which cases are on which pallet, which bottles are in which cases. So when they ship and do the pick, pack, and ship, they also know exactly which serialized numbers they have that they just picked, and they can send that information on down to their trading partner.
Well, it seems to me, I get that. So it sounds to me like there's got to be some agreement on carrier or a unification. So we're
absolutely.
What's that all about?
So carrier, indeed, there's the 2D barcode seems to be the best carrier, that's for sure. At one point, people thought the RFID, kind of the little tag we have when we used to run and it gets scanned. RFID seems to be the way to go at first, but this was quite costly and unreliable. So in the state, people tend to go with a 2D carrier. The only carrier, and again, there's different laws all over the world, but China, which is might change his mind. Before it was a 1D barcode. Now everybody seems to be following the GS1 standard, which is to put a 2D barcode, the GTN, the lot, the expiry, and the serial number all encoded into that information. And about you were mentioning about how the whole supply chain works, but in the state that's a fairly different approach than for the Europe, for example, where the data is stored in a centralized hub, while here in the US, the model was more towards kind of the information, the data sticks with the product, so it follows along with the supply chain. So very similar to when you buy a car, you do the oil change, you take a recording, but when you do sell the car or ship the data, that's the next one in line who's going to be keeping track of that data. And by law, you have to keep all of that data.
So are there enough people doing this to do? In other words, it sounds to me like you're talking about it's awful complicated. So,
good question.
So where are we at?
Well, timelines are getting pushed out. I mean, when you're getting down to the deadline, there's solution providers out there. The good ones are getting full, and timelines are going to get pushed out. So if you haven't really done anything, the sooner you do it, the better you are.
Yeah, the sense I got is this is one of the things that's always been on the back burner when you talk to people. So it sounds to me like, it's going to catch a lot of people with their drawers down, that's for sure. I mean, they know about it, but I think November's going to be here before you know it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, kind of like the California when we had that and stuff, kept getting delayed and getting pushed out. And, I'm not going to say there won't be a grace period or something like they've done with some of the other regulations in the past, but as I don't think they're going to change the law, which they haven't done with any of the others. They gave you a grace period to extend the grace period for you to become compliant, but that doesn't change the law. It just changed the enforcement of the law, and we may get that, we may not, but it won't be 10 years, it won't be 2 years, it may be 6 months or something, but it's not going to be forever.
So are there enough?
I feel that
vendors, or-
what's for sure is that there's a lot of demand these days, and the timeline is short. So seems far away, November 2017. But what's for sure is that there, I don't feel there's enough qualified supplier on the market. That to me, that's clear. Even the qualified supplier are overwhelmed these days. There's a lot of projects to be addressed. I personally joined the team 2 years ago. We were 100. Now we're 500. So everybody's trying to grow as fast as possible and get a good training program in place to be able to meet those demands. But at the moment, there's definitely a lot of demand while the offer is limited. I would say the qualified offer is
How
limited.
much scrambling did you do,
Russ,
Frank?
if I may, also, one other thing is with Apace, we started in 2011 with this project, and we've been running serialized product for a little over a year now. But I had time there to learn and study and figure out what we wanted to do and how to do it. If you haven't really done anything today, you really need to go out and get some consulting resources or somebody that has done it, knows what they're doing to really help you along, because you're too late to try to figure it out for yourself. You're really going to need some help.
And there's a lot of people who did put equipment in the line, but they're not using it much. While I know for Apace, they're using it on a daily basis, so it's kind of a challenge as well to not use the
I think
equipment.
and again, one of the things we were talking about was, the cultural environment or the company. I mean, bottom line is, our industry is glacial at best when it comes to responding to change. I mean, okay. So having said that, something that has to be institutionalized like this, Frank, I mean, some of these innovator companies, we're talking about a pretty steep hill here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not cheap, and that's one reason I say go out and get you some consulting help or something, because paying them can really save you money from the mistakes you can make with not having somebody that can really help you down the road.
If I may add to that, I would say that the IT part is often neglected. So usually
Right.
people are used to having some equipment, so to implementing some equipment on the line. And most of the time this has to be connected. You have to use some serialized number. You have to send a report back based on the EPCI standards. So there are some IT involved in that. And most of the time we're seeing the project driven from one direction, and it seems like the IT is left apart. So that would be a good thing to get people involved, or at least get the IT early in the process
Yeah.
to understand the whole structure.
And
of
also
the
the RA department, quality department, so they kind of understand what's going on before it actually starts happening.
AR, you're talking actual reality is actual.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was we were talking about this before. What was it, yesterday? We were talking about equipment so that things can be read in line, things can be understood. Sounds and the same thing. The IT guys was like, nobody bothered to tell them about it, and was like, oh my God, how am I supposed to do this? And that turned out to be the big stumbling block for implementation on that one.
To me, I would say yes. I would say IT is fairly the game changer. Honestly, you just can't operate the system if you don't have any IT. You
Right.
can. There's all of the functionality built in. But when I use the example as a CMO, when you're going to be dealing with multiple vendors, it becomes a real headache getting those serialized number in and out. So you have to think about a flexible solution. You never know what's going to be coming up. But this is definitely something which was neglected.
What about challenges? We'll take it from a vendor and a CMO. I mean, where are we at? What
I-
challenges you face?
I think a couple of things that kind of stands out with me because, like I say, other than just working on the Apace project, I've helped a couple other companies try to get their projects off the ground. People don't understand about how much trouble it is to get all their master data aligned to where you can come down to the line master and do all that automatic pull. It's a huge investment in time to get all that master data because everybody's saying they've just thrown master data in one way or another just to get it in, and now you got to get it all where we can go up and map that stuff down to the line. It's a lot different. The other thing is I'd encourage people, and I'm going to include myself in this, most of the people here sit in offices don't get out on the line and operate on the line every day and understand. You think you know how the line works. I had the same problem, but when you actually get out there and try to implement some of this equipment, the operator said, well, yeah, that's how we do it, but for a couple of these items, it don't work exactly like that. We have to do this. Well, you just changed your whole FS and DS because of this little thing that's a this that nobody actually mentioned to you. Spend some time out there on the floor, work with your operators and spend some quality time out there, not 5 minutes, to learn what the little niches is and get them to tell you where these little issues pop up. You got these 2 items that you run every 3 months that you have to do this for. Well, you need to account for that when you're doing your thing. And that's something everybody thinks they know what happens out there on the floor, but you don't until you spend some hours out there doing the job.
Where you at on that?
The key challenges, I believe, is supporting the training. From our perspective, as I mentioned, there's a lot of demand these days. I think we need to focus. There's a lot of different offers down there, but on our end, definitely growing, but growing with some intelligence. So growing by training the right people, getting the people ready when we're sending them into some installation. Get some module which are fairly easy to implement. So clearly, we don't feel that everybody's going to be able to meet those deadlines at this point. So we're working on solutions which are easily implemented. So instead of having the fully geared solution on day one, having kind of a phase approach. So having a basic solution which will be allowing you to meet the deadline. So manually, for example, printing those serialized numbers instead of using the full automatic machine. But then you'll be able to meet the 2017 deadline, reuse most of that equipment, and then start being able to have a more automatic and more efficient machine.
Say, Frank, you bring up a question. You bring a point up that's been a thread through a lot of what our discussion is, and is at the heart of a lot of stuff, and that is knowledge, right? And what you describe with, well, yeah, it holds really except for this, or better yet, normally we run that on Tuesday, and Bob's at the line. That starts to sound vaguely familiar, right? And what that really turns out to be is that's what's called tacit knowledge. And we as an industry, we don't capture that very well. It has to be explicit, written down, otherwise it's a damn rumor. And
Yeah.
I think that's a challenge for a CMO.
Right.
So is this thing one size fits all? Just to change subject, but I'm agreeing with you, but on the same topic. Guy like Apace, right? Did I say that right?
Apace.
So if you got 87 different put-ups, is this a one-size-fits-all? How does this work?
It is definitely not a one-size-fits-all.
That makes my day.
And when we designed ours, we spent a lot of time talking to OPTEL and what our options was. I talked to other companies, how they was doing this, how they was doing that, because I knew what Apace was doing today, but I don't know what Apace is going to be doing 6 months from now or whatever. And we wanted to make ours as flexible as we could. So some of these other companies, the CMOs, are probably not going to get there and be ready. So folks are looking to come and bring their products to Apace. So we tried to make it as flexible as we could so we can meet their requirements when they get there, even though it's not what we've been doing in the past.
So then, is it, when people ask you, is that the first impression? Is it one size fits all, or what do you think?
There are some solutions who fits, that's for sure. But from a CMO perspective, when you don't know much what's going to be the next product coming in, I feel that the no one size fits all isn't perfectly suited. Yeah. I remember, and Apace is one of the few which decided to move forward, seeing like building the equipment is kind of an advantage, like a competitive advantage. They started with the kind of an approach where they wanted to have the broadest offering possible. So you look at the equipment, and then you're able to pick a camera with a higher resolution, for example. So you know that if a customer wants you to pack in a bigger box at one point, you'll be able to manage that. To me, you have there's no one size fits all. There are some, and it brings some value to the market, because a one size fits all, you're able to deliver that way faster than a customer solution. But I don't think one size fits all suits well the CMOs.
But Frank, what I'm hearing is a definite competitive advantage that you can leverage for your business. Am I right?
That was definitely our thought process going in early and getting started early, and we did implement full aggregation on our lines. We can turn any level of that off that a customer doesn't want. So far, we haven't talked to anybody that doesn't want them. If it's available, we want it, you know. But so we made it as flexible as we could, and so we could fit that, and it's working for us so far. We've got a lot of folks looking to move products to us. We're having to add another packaging line just to meet the capacity needs.
Let me ask you this then. I mean, one of the things we always know, and this is something that comes up all the time, comes up quite often. I'm going to do this. Well, it turns out when you do that, you need 6 other people and an infrastructure to do that. So, what other changes other than putting stuff on the line? In other words, you implemented this. So, what part of the business structure did you have to reconsider? The compliance, quality, what did you do?
Well, I mean, it's all new training, new SOPs, a lot of stuff that you got to involve in this. But before we implemented our first lines, the human race as a whole probably hates change more than anything. So, and my employees were no different. They was coming to me, why we got to do this? We don't know how to operate all this computer stuff, and we don't want to do all this stuff. 6 weeks after our first implementation, the same folks was coming to me, when we get the next one. Our employees love it. I mean, they like I say, we run serialized product every day at our plant, and our employees fuss when we don't run serialized product, when we run a non-serialized product now, because they'd a lot rather run serialized product. We was able to build in a lot of things in there to help out with the human error issues of things, where we count bottles in the bundles, we count bundles into cases and cases to pallets, to help make their job thinkless, and they're just performing the task, and it helps them from making mistakes. So they really prefer to run serialized product today, because it made their life a lot easier.
Was there anything you had to do to your quality systems? Did you have to put on more, different compliance folks? Or?
There's more. Well, you're printing more data. There's more things to inspect, and still, in process checks, there's more things to check. Absolutely.
But most of the solution out there do have those built in, so kind of the audit trail, all of the reports. So usually when you get with that kind of a system where you have serialization and aggregation, it comes with some report easing you the whole process of doing your reconciliation at the end. So indeed, it comes with some impacts as well, probably on the overall equipment efficiency, but in terms of quality, I would say serialization adds to the quality in the end.
Well, yeah, it adds to the quality, but it also has to be managed. That's where I'm at.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So Ben, I mean, guy calls you up tomorrow and says he's got to be doing this next week. So how's the timing work out?
Well, next week at the panel this morning, I know the folks were talking about a year and a half or 2 years for building the whole program into you. But providing a solution doesn't take that long, that's for sure. But I'm sure you would be going any of the supplier out there, and it's going to be months, so 20, 24 weeks. But this is usually the time frame you're going to be hearing. But keeping in mind that there's so many different configurations possible. Do you want aggregation? What speed are you running to? Is there any OEM involved? So there's a lot of variables into that, but if the guy asks for a system next week, I think he's in big trouble. That's for sure.
I got that. Well, we've heard it's 6 years in your particular case, right?
Well,
we're done with that project.
Yeah, not really 6 years, but it took 6 years or 4 years to learn what we needed to do and what we wanted to do, and then a year and a half to implement, after we cut POs before we implement. So, I mean, it's...
A good practice that I think Apace did, which I find very interesting, is that they actually didn't train all of their staff. So indeed, it brings a certain level of complexity to your line. So it's a brand new interface. You're now dealing with serialized number. Every item is unique. So you cannot do the same operation as you're used to doing. But what Apace did, which I think is a good practice, is that instead of training all of their operators, they decided to have some lead operators back there, which were very knowledgeable. I would say sometimes more than some of our technicians. So at one point, these guys were the experts. So anytime there was an issue down there, you had someone locally very good at it. And knowing that they had some responsibility, they were taking their role very seriously. And I think it helps you out a lot.
And they're there to cover 4 lines, not just one line, one person per line. There's one person out there that just, our operators accept warnings and stuff like that. But when it comes to anything bigger than that, they holler for what we call our serialization specialist, and they come over and fix whatever needs to be fixed and get them back up and going and stuff. Instead of training 25, we train 5.
So what's your recommendation if somebody's going to do this? They go straight out and do the aggregation? Take that approach?
Absolutely.
Seems to me it'd be, what do you think?
Well, the closer you get to the deadline before you start, the more you're going to have to think about doing it in at least 2 phases. Because, like I said, you can do serialization a lot quicker than you can do serialization and aggregation. So if you want to do aggregation and do it all at one time, which is the most economical overall, you need to you should already be going.
Absolutely.
But if you're going to wait very much longer to start, you're probably going to have to think about doing it in 2 phases just to meet the 2017 deadline with serialization, and then come back in later and add aggregation when you can.
Is that where you see this going, Ben?
Yeah, to me, aggregation, if I would be in those shoes, CMO shoes, I would go with aggregation as well. So again, good talks, Catalan mentioned it this morning. If you have 80% of your product which needs aggregation, you don't want to be dealing with 2 kind of ways of dealing with products. So you want to be running full aggregation every time. From a cost perspective, we did a white paper on that at one point where we evaluate the difference in between, and a lot of people forget about the indirect costs associated into doing that twice. So instead of stopping everything, so you stop your line, indeed there's a cost to doing that, but instead of stopping it once, you have to stop it twice. Usually when we implement aggregation, we're going to be sending 2 technicians out there because you can do something in parallel, while when you're only running serialization, you're doing it all at once. So there's some overlap. You're going to be stopping your line for more time. You're going to be hiring a validation specialist, which will have to come twice. You're going to be having to deal with a product manager twice. So there's cost to it. But indeed, there's some advantage of going with a multiple phase approach, starting with serialization and then aggregation. The investment is lower. And the only place where I wouldn't be going full-fledged with aggregation all at first is if you plan on changing your case packer, for example. So if you do have an equipment that you plan on changing in a couple of years, then it might be worth stopping for a certain period of time and then implementing aggregation when you'll be changing that old system. So that you do it all at once. But definitely, to me, it's straightforward. It would be aggregation. And as I mentioned, we're quite busy already, so we would prefer a 2-phase approach as a supplier. But it seems like the way to go is fully aggregated.
It seems to me that life is going to dictate that at the rate we're going. I mean, what we're talking about, we're coming up on the wall pretty quick, you know?
Yeah.
And in our industry, that's November 7th.
Yeah, it's tomorrow.
That's around the corner.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's tomorrow. And it's a couple of, as I mentioned, it's at least a couple of months if you know what you're doing just to get the line ready. Because what you need to take into account, it's not only like building a machine. It starts from the URS. There's going to be people going do the site survey. There's going to be a lot of different steps where you do the FS being the functional spec. There's a lot of processes, and some people take it lightly. That's what I expect, since there's not that much CMO which are ready as up to now. So I expect people are not realizing how many steps are involved in that process.
So let's talk some reality, though. I mean, all right, Frank. So how long I heard that word, that words we never want to hear is shut down.
Yeah.
Especially if it's coming to from my contractor.
Right.
So what are we talking about in real life here? I mean, what is that?
Well, you know, I can't really speak to that today, what it would be, because when we did our implementation, we were going through some restructuring of our company, and we were able to just shut a line down and do what we need to do for however long we need to do it, run all of our capacity on the other line. So, you know, we were in no hurry. We didn't push. We wanted a good solution. We wanted a good
Wonderful
training,
environment for us, by the way. It's not like that usually.
and that's not common.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's
You
talk
know,
about the
they're
more
on,
common.
they're under the gun when they shut a line
Wow.
down for most
Right.
people.
The more common, the technician will be stressed out. No, it's usually, I would say, 2 weeks for implementing serialization, not taking into account the whole validation. So 2 to 3 weeks to implement serialization, and we're talking about 3 weeks at least to aggregation, to implement aggregation, which involve multiple different stages. This is only to implement the solution. After that, validation comes in, could be 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So we're talking about 2 months where your line won't be running. So we highly suggest that you don't plan on doing all of your line at once. You start with a pilot, you test it out, you get some lesson learned out of that, and then you move on to maybe the less busiest line. And a comment I would add to that is I highly recommend anyone who want to be picking a supplier not to rely on only the serialization to pick the supplier, because serialization is pretty straightforward. I would highly recommend someone to start with a pilot line. That includes aggregation. So you get a feeling of all of the complexity involved in the aggregation as well, and if you're comfortable or not with that solution. So not picking a supplier only based on the serialization, but really try on a pilot line, the full aggregation. You're fine with what the supplier brings in, so then you can move on with the other line with that supplier. But a lot of solutions out there are not good for aggregation.
And like anything else, the first one's the most painful. They get easier after that, and you get quicker after that with doing stuff, because you learn what you can do in parallel and stuff. Because once they implement one machine, you can as they're moving on down to the next one, you can go ahead and start the IQ, OQ, and stuff like that, and it gets less painful as you go along.
So does this mean that to do this you have to have product or a placebo or something to run it? So what do you got to run this thing. You ain't going to run it with
usually
good wishes.
that's one of the first things we're going to be asking. And when I'm talking about delays, we always look at the sunny day scenario. So getting all of the SKUs, we need kind of a product matrix. You want to be sure that those systems address the full listing of the product for a specific customer. If it's a CMO, the CMO needs to come, I want to cover that range. And my recommendation, by the way, for CMO would be to start with that information and send it over to your customer, which often doesn't know your limitation. But indeed, for the product, we need some placebo. We need the full grid of all of the product, which is going to be covered. So it's an extensive process just to get that information in.
And another thing, when you're buying this equipment and stuff, you got to FAT it, and you got to have the serialized data on there. That's something we've done a whole lot of, is just serializing products for other people so they can send it to an FAT so they can test their equipment out.
So there's that expense too. Obviously you can't go to your clients and ask them to supply. How does that work? What do you do then? So that's got to be, if you're a CMO, that adds to the complexity of doing this.
Yeah, it makes it very expensive. Very expensive.
And the burden, for a CMO perspective, you need to take into account serialization. We have to print the information onto the artwork. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess it's not fairly easy to convince your customer to change his artwork, since you're not the one owning the product.
Until they finally decide that, okay, we got to do this, it's hard to get them to change anything. And so we're engaging with a lot of ours now and stuff, and most of them are agreeing to artwork changes on the labels, knowing that by the 1st of 2017, they want to start serializing product. Had a conversation with the quality department with one of our customers the other day. They knew they was moving forward, so I'm asking, because with print and apply labels for bundles and cases, that changes the whole thing, because they're not issued out of the regulatory department anymore. They're print and applied on the line, so we have to sign off on a master label, and they're like, well, that's not why we do our shipping labels. I'm like, well, I understand that, but this is what we're going to have to do when we go to serialization. And they're like, well, we've been using this regulation for 10 years. I said, yes, but that's not going to work in the next 2 years, They're like, oh, crap. They just then realized that we got to change everything.
Mm-hmm.
So do they have to build in a label approval time from the regulators?
Yeah.
So that's another thing they have to do.
Yeah, I mean,
That's got to add time.
there's the bottle labels that people are using for non-serialized product doesn't have the print area to even print all this data with a 2D data matrix and 4 lines of human readable. So if that's all you do, you still have to change the artwork on the label and get new dyes and all that stuff, which is a very expensive just in itself, getting that done just so you can print the data on there.
Just managing as well the inventory. I'm guessing these guys have a huge inventory of labels, so that would be a good practice just to manage those inventory, putting them down.
Yeah,
and
nobody
use
wants
the
to
other
throw
one.
away $100,000 worth of labels, so you want to make these changes early enough that you can work through all your other labels before you're going to start printing on there and not have to throw a bunch away.
And where I'm coming from the user side, I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking how much more time I'm going to have to incorporate into this whole painful operation, right? I mean, we're hearing a week to 2 weeks to do this. We're hearing that, but you got to add that other piece in, and
Absolutely.
to do that, and the labeling and the approvals and internal approvals alone are going to be a month.
And that's why you got to include all departments from the very beginning, so everybody thinks about what they got to do and get started. Because if you cut your PO on your equipment and you don't start your label changes at the same time, you're going to have equipment in that you can't do anything with without throwing away a bunch of labels.
So the whole process is way more than the couple of weeks I was talking about.
Yeah.
So we're talking about years, year and a half. So,
So how many new compounds do you see that's coming in that's already been done? You know what I'm saying, right?
how many new company?
You know what I mean? In other words, how many people have already built this into the system? I mean, obviously somebody's got to be building in from square one, right? I mean,
A couple of ones, that's for sure. We've been the biggest ones have been implementing the solution. The number I have in mind is 2,000 lines are available in the state at this stage, and I would say 1/10 of them would be done at this time. So we realize that we're far away from the number, which is why we were talking about we feel that at one point some people will have a 6-month mercy, because it seems like the whole program we were talking about a year and a half this morning at the panel, or 2 years, seems like we're already late. So there's no way everybody's going to be ready for that time, and you don't want to be dealing with quarantine or not being able to deliver your product at all. That's for sure.
well, let me ask another question. So, invariably, the guy's always going to say is, so I'm going to do this. So how much slower is the process going to run? Is that going to apply here?
Well, I'll be quite frankly, we're probably faster today than we were before we implemented serialization at Apace. Now, I'm not going to attribute all that to serialization, because we made some equipment changes. We used it as an opportunity to make some equipment changes with tablet counters and some other processes that we had on our lines while we were doing it. But all that together, we're back to 100% or more than 100% of where we were before we started all the changes. I mean,
But that would be lying, saying that there's no drawback.
right. And the other thing is, when you're running serialized product, I mean, anybody that's been in packaging at one time or another has had a bottle get out without a label on it. You had a bundle that didn't get all 12 bottles in it, or you had a case that didn't get all 24 bottles in it. With serialization, where you're counting, that's some of the stuff we added in, but there's no way a bottle gets down our line without a label on it. It's impossible, because you're looking for that 2D barcode 3 different times before it gets to the box. Mm-hmm. Same thing with counting the bottles into bundles. If it got 11, it gets rejected. If it's got 10, it gets rejected. If it's got 13, it gets rejected. We count bundles into cases, so all the cases leave there full. So we don't have those issues with serialization that we used to have before serialization. That's one reason my employees, operators, love serialization. We're not going back through cases after cases trying to find a label somewhere.
But there is some drawbacks. To be honest, I feel that you're right. In the end, you can be winning by implementing serialization, but day one, what's for sure is that there's going to be some impact. There's going to be a drawback in terms of productivity, so you're going to be losing it. The kind of the magic number we keep hearing is 3 months that you're able to get back on the on
there's
track.
no doubt about that. The first 2 months is warship. I mean, you if you get 50% of what you was, you're lucky. Just because the operators are trying to understand it, and there's nobody there that really understands it at all. But we's probably 3 to 4 months, we was back to running something that was close to being acceptable. In 6 months, we were, flying high at that point.
So what's the biggest
the
challenge?
first two, that's why I say the first line is the most painful.
Gotcha.
Because once you move to that second line, you've got enough employees that understand that all happens, and they're not bug-eyed when they're turning this equipment on. They're used to it, and it makes sense to them. They know what's going. They know what to expect. So that's the second line's a lot better, and the third one's even better.
Yeah, we're kind of nearing the end here, but I think one of the key pieces I wanted to ask before we see if there's any questions is, so what's the big challenge here? I mean, you did your part, but there's other components. There's people, it's where it's going, it's how's it being used. I mean, what's the big challenge of track and trace? Where's it fall apart?
I feel there's a key challenge, and I've been saying that a couple of times. I feel that the whole RT architecture is definitely a challenge. So the communication between the different levels, level 1 being kind of the devices, the line controller being level 2, the plant level 3, the way it's exchanged altogether doesn't work very well these days. There's more than 10 different suppliers of the line. There's more than 20 different suppliers which are going to be supplying their own IT architecture, but none of them has really kind of a standard to talk to each other. So this brings quite a lot of customization for the interfacing between all of those solutions, and this costs billions of dollars to all of the company which have to deal with those interconnectivity. Yeah. So we need to come up with some sort of a standard altogether, and there's some works doing in that way.
I think you absolutely hit that dead on the head, because not only are pharmaceutical companies historically not really want to share too much information to each other, now we're talking about a bunch of IT companies that don't necessarily want to share stuff together either. So, and everybody's going to have to start talking at some point. And I think that's really the biggest challenge that we're facing today.
Invariably, when a project fails, it's because it's managed from a silo basis. And what I'm hearing there is, as an industry, we weren't talking, we called different unit operations by several different names to the point where NDAs were delayed. So, it took us years to figure that one out. And this one sounds like even a bigger problem. So what kind of national, is there a national groundswell? Is somebody out there, we got to fix this? What's going on?
Yeah, there is there is some action which are done. It's called Open SCS, so Serialization Standard, being discussed at that table. So at the moment, they're trying to define the discussion. There was kind of a financial issue. In 2015, they started to raise some money out of it. And now in 2016, they were really working towards the workshop and the different exchanges in between. So yeah, there's some work done on that. But keeping in mind that the deadline is around the corner, there's a lot of, there's already a lot of problems that needs to be managed out there. There's a lot of investment, a lot of money was invested while we should have a standard, but we don't.
Wow, okay. So we got a couple minutes. We'll open it up. We'll take a couple of questions. If not, don't everybody, like I always say, don't everybody jump up at once. Okay, so we want to say thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Thanks.
Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with INTERPHEX 2016, presents INTERPHEX Live.